on air.
Happy Monday morning, people. Let's get this week started right with some Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs, and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we discuss the news, hot button issues, and content of the highly anticipated World of Warcraft Classic. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and as you all know by now, this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts, but yours. Yes, you there, sitting in your cubicle wondering if anyone would notice if you popped off that silent fart. You! Countdown to Classic spends the next 90 minutes or so hearing your expert opinion on the hot button issues surrounding the impending release of the sure-to-be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. If you hear anything on the show that you'd like to comment on, then check countdowntoclassic.com for all the social links, or email feedback@countdowntoclassic.com with your reactions, or on the show, throw you some love and give you some updates on what's to come throughout this week. But for now, let's get to the news and discussions of the week with this week's Forum and Fauna.
Shit, baby. Got shit. That's right.
Each Monday, Countdown to Classic breaks down some of the hottest forum topics through the week on either the WoW Classic Reddit page or the official WoW Classic forums. As always when we do this, Countdown to Classic breaks down both sides of the coin and goes into bat for both sides of an argument so everyone gets their say and you get all the information with which you can then make an informed decision about how you feel with a certain topic. And the first topic that I bring you this week is actually one that buckle up and don't enter this topic if you're on medication or you're pregnant, because it's going to get very bumpy and interesting and requires somewhat of an open mind. But as we do, both sides of the coin, everyone. So here we go. The first post I bring you was from the user Give Me a Drink, who actually posts twice, but I'll go through both of them. And they say the following: pure no changes incompatible with recreating the vanilla experience. Discovery and theory crafting are at the core of the vanilla experience, and they are nullified by recreating the same game with the same values. The AQ effort is a great example. Leaving it unchanged will trivialize it. And their second post flows on from that. That's not a reason to create a museum. There are plenty of possible changes that would be in line with vanilla, all while opening up new strategies, builds, specs, group comps, etc. And this is before even starting about release. Doozy there. And let's begin with that rather big point, and that is, what is the vanilla experience? Well, to me, it was being dropped into a relatively unknown, huge world. And yes, discovery was definitely one of the driving factors behind that quote-unquote vanilla experience. Now, this unpopular opinion is that if it's a big aim of WoW Classic to recreate that classic feeling or that vanilla experience, then doesn't that fly in the face of the hashtag no changes movement? Is there a way in which we could tweak what you can without breaking the game? Perhaps that's by way of, I don't know, different stats, different AQ items, different honor system, anyone? Who knows? But some tweaks that, now some of you very much so may say, Josh, everything you just said is absolutely game-breaking. Are you high? In which I would answer, no, I'm not high, but however, we're snowballing here. So, think about it. What possible small things could Blizzard do that might actually enable us to go through everything starry-eyed all over again and be like, whoa, I haven't seen this before, this is new? Because the point is that, yes, we have years of theory crafting, years of experiencing this content over and over again. How can Blizzard, without getting the no changes crowd all rankled up, possibly put a fresh coat of paint on this? And yes, that is obviously a very unpopular opinion given the way in which the no changes movement has been steamrolling through the forums and everything. But I thought I'd just start with you. Base is still both bad and the minority. I do feel that we are still, and I've said this before on the show, that we as a whole are going to struggle with the content. Now, Classic is a challenge for the majority of players. All of you people who are screaming that it's not, you're amazing players. And I completely understand where you're coming from when you scoff and say, Josh, do you know why you say Classic is hard? Because you're a fucking twat of a player. And I completely readily accept that. However, what I also would ask that you accept is some players perhaps, I think, don't have quite the grasp on the proportion a dime a dozen. That's why I see you all pitching about it online. You're crying out, where are all the good players at? Where can I get a great guildie around here? What's going on? What do I have to do? You all suck. I'm the best. Blah, blah, blah. You know that it's hard to find skilled players. There is a reason. There's a bit of a bell curve in WoW. The majority of players are pretty average at the game. Yet, you still say that the content will be face-rolled. But what happens when you're the only great player, or perhaps one of two, in a pickup group? What will you say then? Will you be reminded pretty quickly that, oh yes, we're struggling through this dungeon or through this raid when there's 40 of you, because it is hard to find good help in World of Warcraft? And flowing on from that, how hard will it be to get a collection of you together? Yes, of course. The upper tier guilds will have essentially pre-made guilds. They've got their buddies who are great at the game and they'll roll through the content. I do not dispute that in any way. The content will get taken down quickly by some. And when I say by some, I still feel by very few. I think the vast majority of us will very much so be moaning our way through mid-tier and access to add-ons and more information for everyone. And the point there is that private server play kind of displays how far we've come as a player base skill-wise. People are awesome now at this game on the whole. You were so wrong, Josh, earlier. We are a kick-ass group of players. World of Warcraft is like child's play to us these days. The people you're speaking about won't be involved in Classic. The shitty players, they won't be around. And if they are, they'll have gotten better with time. MMOs aren't new to us anymore like they were around the days of WoW Vanilla. And also, another point is that generally, the crowd will be a little bit older due to that nostalgia bug bringing everyone back. What comes with age? A bit of experience. Perhaps that will flow into a bit of extra skill. And then you get to the face-rolling element of the game. And also, on top of that, as the user mentions, our hardware will be better. Our internet connections will be better. Lag, Maybe that will be a thing of the past, won't be an issue like it was back in the day. There were a lot of problems with that before. Trust me, I know, particularly having played the game from Australia. I was very used to, as I've mentioned before, 300 to 400 millisecond lag. And yes, did it make the game frustrating? Absolutely. Did it make the game that little bit harder? For sure. On top of that, encounters, those will all presumably be fixed up in Classic. This is all just adding up to why the content will be easier. However, personally, I really must people who play Classic will have played on a private server. One of those users mentioned that earlier, and I think that's a bit of a throwaway comment. I don't believe that private servers are quite as accessible as people think. Now, again, I can hear you all scoffing, going, Josh, it's so bloody easy to set up. I know. I did it. And I'm moderately handy, technologically speaking. But, I mean, I could set it up, that's all well and good, but I do know people that couldn't. For example, one listener of the show, and actually one of my co-hosts for the Cinephiles podcast that I do, is a World of Warcraft fan. When I told him about the concept of private servers, he hadn't heard of them before, so I explained it to him. And he said, oh, how would one go about checking this out or setting it up? And I explained it, and he just went, that all sounds a little bit hard for me. And this guy is not by any means a technological dum-dum, but wasn't either particularly interested or it just sounded like a little bit of work. And I feel like that stops a lot of people from checking out these private servers. If it's not terribly easy, and I know it is pretty easy, guys, give me a little bit of a break, but for some people they see it as a slight hurdle to get over. What, I've got to go into a WTF file and change some text? Oh man. Look, for some people that is hard, so I just say that it's not perhaps as super duper accessible as some people seem to think. But I will say that I got into it a fraction today as well with someone on another Discord channel who actually also stated that private servers, they believed, would outperform WoW Classic after its release in terms of numbers. I thought that was a little bit preposterous. I mean, shout me down if you think otherwise. Please, please do. But I just thought, and maybe many of you agree with me, that this kind of is supposed to be the private server killer. Now, I'm working on the presumption that World of Warcraft Classic is delivered to us in a fantastic fashion that makes the vast majority of people happy. Obviously, if they make a million billion changes, then it's going to produce something that might be a very long point back home. What I'm trying to say is that definitely, no way have the majority of people who are going to be playing World of Warcraft Classic jumped onto a private server. Either they felt hindered by A, a moral obligation not to play, B, scared of legality, C, have stopped playing the game in general and aren't particularly interested and only whole time during vanilla. We played it for over 2 years and we got better as the game went on. We learned things. We learned how to play our class. We learned how to stop clicking spells. We learned how to stop keyboard turning, all of that jazz. Granted, not all of us learnt those lessons, but I would suggest back in the day. And you might say, well, yeah, back in the day, because that's all we had, Josh. This is now going back to an old game. Why would the young people come over to an old game? And the reason being, there's a crowd for everything. Think of your 12-year-old self. There's probably plenty of your 12-year-old selves out there who are into old-school, hardcore MMORPGs. And whether you term WoW as one of those or not, it's definitely a very different beast to some other options that are out there. And there might be younger people who that appeal. It was other things relating to my skill, usually. But to blame before I crack it, will it be overwhelming, that kind of noise that people might hear due to their with that? Or are we going to argue back and say, no, sir, I believe it's you guys that you saw so many different photos of back in the day, some crazy ones. People have a million things running. If we were to strip that away from absolutely every user, does that count as a change? You haven't changed the game. You've just changed the accessibility to some information. You've just changed the look of people's UIs. You've just changed a little bit of custom. And the point that user raises is, if you don't like it, just don't use it. Similar to the old TV theory, Moving on to user Jakubov, who says, now I know you've all just jumped back, but listen, hear me out. It's, I mean, whether you use the term remaster or not, it's, hey, look, in Hollywood, you've got the Westerns, which obviously died and people tried to resurrect them over time, things like that. Clint Eastwood did a pretty good job at one point. But will this be the game that revives the so-called dead genre of MMOs? Will WoW Classic, quote-unquote, bring it back? Will it be in vogue again? Now, I know the genre isn't entirely dead, and I'm one of those people that poo-poos the notion that it's dead. I don't think it's dead, I just think it's sleeping. But perhaps World of Warcraft, and there is a lot of pressure, in a way, on World of Warcraft Classic's shoulders, will be the injection that this genre that we love so much needs. And I really do agree that I think this is a pretty big deal, and that some of the notions that that user puts forward with the attention it will get, perhaps from some more negative corners, might very well come. There's a lot riding on this, but we shall see. We move now to the next post from user Albu, and this is actually from MMO Champion, and they say the following. While not dividing your player base is an important rule in game development, I think Blizzard, somewhat begrudgingly, accepted at some point last year that there's an entire community full of people that will never play retail again, but wants to or is already playing vanilla somewhere. So since their player base is already divided, the real decision they're facing seems to be, do I want to be paid for letting these people play vanilla and get some really good PR out of it? Or do I want to keep paying lawyers and not be collecting money from them playing vanilla elsewhere, whilst also having to deal with constant rebels spawning in my forums? And the point that user raises is, if there's going to be dramatic elitist assholes playing the game somewhere, then we might as well give them our version and make some money while we're at it, coming from Blizzard's perspective, obviously. If people want the game, how they act within it is up to them. Maybe that's part of the way that they enjoy the WoW experience. But honestly, maybe this so-called gathering of the clans is for the best in WoW Classic. Let's get everyone in the one place. Let's get all you private server players. Let's get all you people who've never played the game before. Let's get all you returning players who might have quit for the last few years. Let's get all you retail players. Let's just get everyone together, start the melting pot, and see what happens. The player base is already highly divided. What we need now is something to come together over. At least with an official version of Classic, it's a place where we can all either bitch about stuff together or just enjoy a goddamn video game together. Maybe it's going to heal the wounds if it's awesome. We get to the next post from user Empty Allocution, who says this. I don't think Blizzard have any plans to include expansions into WoW Classic. I think it's going to be vanilla and vanilla only. I see a lot of folks talking about the prospects of BC and Wrath. I just don't see it. If they need more infrastructure in place for vanilla, they need it for every other consecutive expansion, and they need to be actively managing it. Just looking at that from a top-down perspective highlights the work and responsibilities involved. I don't think it's going to happen. We should be happy that we're getting vanilla. And the point that user raises is a really interesting one, and it's something that's obviously been coming up a fair bit. What happens next? Do we get Burning Crusade servers? Do we get Wrath servers? Where does this go from here? And the unpopular opinion that they're raising, and I would agree that it seems to be slightly unpopular because a lot of people do seem to think that is the natural progression of things, but their opinion is no. This is a one-off venture. We are just getting vanilla because there was a great campaign for it, a lot of people wanted it, and now we're getting it. Blizzard is somewhat begrudgingly giving us this product. They don't want to keep going. They don't want to take the time and effort to relive all the glory days, expansion by expansion. They've got to focus already, and it's called retail. Classic is just here to appease what is, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively minor amount of World of Warcraft fans. Blizzard is not in the business of looking to the past. Blizzard has told us vanilla means vanilla, and they've intimated very strongly that they do not want to devote a lot of cash or a lot of effort or a lot of staff to this venture. As little effort is going into this as possible in a way, so you don't jump down my throat for that one. Obviously, they can. That's for it or not, perhaps. They just realize that there is money to be made in nostalgia, and this very well might prove the point. So that it's not unheard of for Blizzard to cancel a project, such as StarCraft Ghosts and Project Titan. Incredibly unlikely. Fucked up. We thought we could do it. We can't. It's clear that too many of you are too divisive over too many issues, and we're not going to be able to please enough of you, so we're just not doing it. That obviously would break all our hearts. But could it happen? That goes by without any news, I get very, very upset. But the next post might alleviate those concerns when we hear from user Chipye, who says this: the BlizzCon announcement and the trailer would haunt them forever. There is no turning back now. And I do agree with that post. The community would absolutely murder Blizzard. That would be a PR nightmare that would be very, very hard to come back from. There would be riots. God, Ian Hazakostas would potentially be dragged out of Blizzard HQ and publicly pantsed out the front so that we can all laugh at his Mickey Mouse underwear or whatever it is he might wear. You know that scene at the start of Argo? That's what's going to happen if Blizz cancels Classic. Just perhaps without the hostage situation. Maybe. But we go to the next post from user HazHap, and I know this has been a very long segment, guys, but it was a really interesting one, and that's why I've dedicated a bit of time to it. And all they say this is about their unpopular opinion alert. The potential of Classic WoW will be wasted on hashtag no changes. And that's a very deep point that they're making there, and kind of the main point of the changes crowd, I guess, is that it's something that warrants thought and discussion, really. I know many of you are no changes people, and just a reminder, I am no changes, but some of you believe that it's heresy to even discuss changes. I don't subscribe to that theory because, you know what? I advocate for critical thinking. Yes, I want no changes, but we can talk about anything, whether it gets done or not. I don't want them, but, you know, let's talk about why you think a change should be made and have an intelligent conversation about it. But the point here is Blizzard missing a chance to make history because of hashtag no changes? If Blizzard were to rewrite history and remaster the game as a perfect experience in 2018, wouldn't that be the killer blow and just absolutely cement their authority over the genre and the... Look, we made the perfect remake of Classic. Here is the perfect game. We nailed it. Here's what it always should have been. Now, a lot of you are freaking out right now, but relax. I've got your backs. I couldn't find a reply against that post that I just read. And I lied to you because I said it was the last one, but it's actually not because, well, it was the last one I found on the forums, but here's the real last post. It's on a post. It's from me. I couldn't find a reply, so I'm going to give you my own take on this now. And I apologize for going all Jerry Springer on you, but here we go. The answer to the previous post that I just read is no. The potential of Classic WoW lies in its ability to take people back through a gaming experience that we hold dear as one of the greatest that we've ever had. To change that is to pervert our memories and connection to the game. Another guy made a few minor tweaks here and there to a beloved franchise once, George Lucas. How well was that received? People get pissed for a reason when you mess with their nostalgia, and people like to relive a beloved memory exactly as it was. Sure, Blizzard has deep on you, but I thought it would be nice to kind of wind up with that. I did get a little bit of flack this week from someone, and it was interesting to, I do appreciate the constructive criticism is fantastic. Got a bit of flack this week online from someone saying that they felt that this show was way too no changes leaning, and that I had a clear agenda to shout down all of the changes crowd. I do dispute that slightly. I feel like I give a lot of airtime to the changes crowd, and that's the whole meaning of the show, to give both sides of the argument. As you can see, I do lean no changes, but I will hear any argument. But obviously, I do have a preference, and I'm sorry to that person that I offended, but, you know, that's the way it is with the show. But anyway, how about we liven things up now with topic number 2. And this topic was a post I found again on the WoW Classic subreddit. It was posted by user Raynok, and it simply was titled this: Is Classic worth $15 a month? And they said the following: This is something I've been thinking about for a while now. It didn't really bother me at first, but I feel like this is a topic that needs to be discussed. Value. What's the value of paying for a game with no updates? Imagine a game company today releases a game and told their community, okay everyone, here's the complete game we've been working on, we won't be adding any more content or making any changes in any way, oh and by the way it's $15 a month. That would absolutely not fly. From Blizzard's perspective, they're not planning on making changes or adding anything to vanilla that wasn't already there, which is great and I'm all for it. Go team, no changes. We also know that Classic will be a server option in the retail version, which means that it's a one subscription rules all scenario. Players would have the choice between playing the retail version or Classic all under one subscription. This may sound great on the surface, but for those of us who have absolutely no plans on buying the 4 expansions to play retail, it makes zero sense from a value perspective. If we allow Blizzard to do this, I believe it's a huge mistake and a missed opportunity for the community. It's not a big of a risk for Blizzard to do this anymore. Nothing even close to 2004. They already have the infrastructure, the teams and technical details are in place. So for them, it's enormous profits if they don't have to maintain it with patches and content. I can't find the quote, but I remember one of the devs saying that WoW would have been wildly successful with 500,000 active subscribers. I imagine that number today being far lower. With the popularity of Nostarius, we could easily see 5 million plus registered and 2 million plus active. Blizzard has also mentioned that they don't want to manage 2 MMOs, but guess what, my friends? Money talks. Now, sorry about the long post, but that gets things started. The one thing I will just disagree with automatically off the bat, and some of you may have raised an eyebrow at the same point, this user says that we know the subscription that we're getting. We know that it's all going to be under one subscription, and that we know we're getting server options through the retail version. Well, we don't know any of that. That's completely something that they've just added to the story, which is not the case. So, but we'll just go from here, because the whole point of this is to let's hypothesize on the kind of subscription models that we might be getting and whether or not you feel WoW Classic is worth $15 a month. But just before I get there, here's a few figures for you to keep in mind when we talk money. Now, I found an article from 2008. And it said the following. Keep in mind, this is 10 years ago, 2008, 4 years after WoW launched. Apparently, Blizzard had only spent $200 million on the upkeep of World of Warcraft in the 4 years since launch, so about $50 million per year. It was what it was costing them to keep the payroll for the staff going, support their hardware, and have customer service running and things of that nature. $50 million a year. Now, keep that in contrast with what they were actually making. Just off of crunching the numbers from subscription fees and the amount of subscribers they had at the time, and obviously multiplying that by the price per month, they were pulling in around about $1.35 billion per year just from subscriptions. And again, this was in 2008 at one point. So, $50 million to run the game, almost $1.5 billion in revenue just from subs. And then transactions in 2017, did you know that Activision Blizzard as a whole made $4 billion from microtransactions? Holy shit, just think about that. But then obviously you subtract a few things like fewer subscribers now, and obviously there's advertising costs to consider as well. But, you know, you go through all these users talking about whether or not they feel the game is worth $15 a month. and whether Blizzard should either change the price or keep it the same or release things in a certain way, and how would they deal with the finances of the game. Now, we start with user XY13, who says this. Most people believe it will be one subscription for retail and classic, so you'll be paying $15 a month to be getting both. Also, if you do a one-year subscription, it's closer to $12 a month, if I remember correctly. That's the price of a movie ticket. I get much more time and enjoyment out of a WoW subscription than I do going to the movies, though this argument is a bit nullified with Movie Pass. Now, the point they're making is the subscription model. That seems to be the predominant thought there, that yes, $15 game, your wife begs you to quit. Oh, wait, scratch that last one. Okay, that last one's fine. But what I'm getting at is, I think that's a pretty fair price. We all obviously have spent some time paying the subscription fee. We have all at one point of our lives said, yes, Blizzard, I feel that $15 to $20 a month, whatever it is a fair price for your product, and I will continue to pay you for that. So, in the end, we've basically come to terms with the fact that probably we will pay that money and get access to retail and classic, and you just choose which one you want to pay. But we move on to the next post from White Unchained, who says this. Back in retail, I had a US and European sub running, so it was costing me plenty to play back then, but I had much lower overheads. Now, I have kids and lots of bills, so my disposable income is much lower to me than it was then. Even though I can spend $100 on a night out, so asking for 15% of that for a whole month seems reasonable, although if I had the option to sub to only classic and not retail at a reduced rate, I would grab that option without hesitation. My issue is I've been playing for free for years, although donating to a few projects, and Private Realms will only improve with a live database to replicate and not having to study 9 hours of video to find evidence of a bug to make a report. I have no problem paying, it's just a case of how much. I know the hosting and admin costs and profit margins per player for most sub-based games. Blizz has no real cost outlay, other than the staff creating Classic and possibly expanding their customer service and billing departments by maybe 10%. The fact is, if each player is paying $15 a month, Blizz are making about $12 plus off of each player. Current retail customers are guaranteed updates and support, and the margins for profit are smaller as they require more staff for new content than they do for maintaining an existing expansion that won't change, as far as we know. My guess is Blizzard will have Classic bundled free with the current retail expansion. My hope is that they offer a standalone option at a reduced rate. Now, the point that user makes is the option of something else. Basically, could we get a standalone option? Could we get a reduced rate, given that it's not retail, it's not getting updated, there are potentially lower overheads, so to speak. Why should the price be the same? Well, think about it this way. What they're suggesting is basically, and my interpretation was that I think they're saying that were you to buy BFA, that could unlock Classic. So Blizzard would essentially, by their suggestion, is they're saying what could happen is you could be forced to buy the retail expansion, and only then can you get into Classic. Well, and then sort of have that bundled for free, quote-unquote, situation. Either way, it seems to suggest that it's not only a monthly subscription that you would need to pay Blizzard, but also there's a purchase requirement there, which some people have been very, very prickly about. The thought of buying is that there is a point where Blizzard can cross the line and have them still stick to this quote-unquote piracy option. So, at what point do you just think that Blizzard are gouging people given the perhaps low amount of upkeep that might be involved in Classic? We move on to the next point with user Later, who says this. I understand creating Classic servers takes money, and I have no problem with buying World of Warcraft Classic, even though technically I'll be buying the same game again. But what I won't do is buy a separate subscription for Classic WoW. If I have to choose between Classic and Live, I will choose Live, as there are other avenues I can choose for Classic content. And I believe that's a thinly veiled reference to private servers, obviously. But yes, the separate subscription fee and essentially the choice of the two. Imagine if Blizzard were to say, pick one. It is an unpopular opinion. Again, most people think this won't happen, but it's a theory that's out there. Blizzard has a bunch of options before them, a bunch of different pay models that they could go through. Would they consider having people choose? It's like choosing your favourite child. Which one are you going to do? Like the ending of The Good Son. Again, I'm all over with the old movie references today. That's awesome. Anyway, Classic is clearly quite a separate product. Why not lower the fee and make it separate, is what this user is sort of saying. If it's so different, if again we're not getting updates and things of that nature, why not simply make it a month? Perhaps you'd make it $8 a month. Who knows? Isn't that more fair, given what we're getting? A 15-year-old game? Let us choose which one we want to subscribe to. Don't simply lump us in and make us pay a higher rate simply because we get access to retail as well. Anyway, moving on to user Minoru from the Countdown to Classic Discord. Yay! And Minoru says the following. I don't think the subscription should be separate to retail. Having it be a single subscription model would lessen the barriers to entry both ways. People in retail interested in Classic can try it freely, and vice versa. You can't do that if it's a separate fee. The current implementation of a demo doesn't really show enough of the game to give players a good idea of what the game truly has to offer. In addition, I'd wager most people being drawn into Classic are not currently subscribed to WoW. Unless you're arguing that the separate subscription also be $15 per month, or a regional equivalent, for a static game that won't require active development after the initial progression, I fail to see how that will be as profitable or beneficial to Blizzard. I highly doubt many players will quote-unquote double dip their subscriptions for long. It will be one or the other. And the point that I think Minoru is bringing up there is, why cannibalize your own user base? Why have people divided like that? What benefit is there in making fans choose when that might not make for good business? As we've established, Blizzard will do what makes them money. They have the data, the analytics, the stats, and they know what makes them money. They have people on the payroll who can tell them exactly what is likely to make them the most amount of money, whether we like what that decision is or not. But it seems that dividing the community even further is not for the best. Let the players mingle and flip-flop between the two. Some days you might feel like playing Classic. One day you might be like, oh, you know what, fuck it. I'll mess around in retail today. You've got access to both. Do what you feel like. Dividing the two does not make that much sense. It would effectively split Blizzard's audience and could crater their profits in a way. Either way, we move on to the next point. With Alice Commotion, who says this. In my opinion, no 15-year-old remake game is worth subscription in general. Will I be paying $15 if it happens, though? Of course. And then user Chaos Gandalf chimes in with this. You're right. It should, in all fairness, be cheaper than the normal version. Will I personally pay even if it isn't? Yes. And then finally from user Don Luca, who says this. It heavily depends on how Classic WoW will develop. Diablo 3 has a constant influx of changes, new items, balance patches, and so on, and still you only pay at one time when you buy it, plus expansions after, but seasonal changes which include new items, rifts, etc. are all part of the base game. In my humble opinion, WoW Classic, due to its static nature, meaning it won't be expanded, but rather it will have, hopefully, a ladder system with fresh new items and stuff, it's closer to Diablo than World of Warcraft retail. I prefer to pay $69.99 or whatever at launch and be good with it, rather than paying $15 per month for a static game. And the point they raise is this, yet another potential model that Blizzard could go with in terms of payment. Do you just buy WoW Classic and no monthly subscription fee? Well, I think we can all agree that's probably not going to happen. Blizzard is not in the game of not taking monthly subscription fees. However, considering we are getting old content without updates, potentially, none of this stuff